You have to let me share this. You have to let me share the screen too. Please, Shayla. Thanks.
All set.
All right, everybody, we're just going to wait 30 seconds to let all the participants come in, and then we'll get started. All right, it looks like we have at least our quorum of people. So welcome everybody to one of our ACAS webinars for this year. We have decided to tone down the number a little bit this year, just given that everyone had a little bit of Zoom fatigue last year, but we thought that talking about the personal statement, especially as hopefully people are working on it, if not finishing up, would be an appropriate topic as the ERAS opens up very quickly. I'm Jeff Koslow, and I will let my other three panelists introduce themselves as well. Devra.
Hi, I'm Devra Becker. I'm currently at the University of Pittsburgh, and I was in Cleveland for many years prior to this.
Great. Katie.
Hi, I'm Katie Weichman. I'm currently the program director at Montefiore Einstein in the Bronx, New York.
Great. And Russell.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Good evening from Chicago, Russell Reed, University of Chicago Plastic Surgery. I'm the program director there. Good to be part of this panel. Thanks.
And you can ignore that his name at the bottom is Devra Becker. Clearly, we do not have two Devra Beckers here. I do just a disclosure that I do have a licensing agreement with Baxter and Synovus. It clearly has no relationship to any of the things we're going to talk about today, but we need to make sure we share disclosures. I think what else is important is that we all really work extensively with medical students as career advisors. This is both in plastic surgery and other fields. Dr. Weichman and Dr. Russell or Dr. Reed are both program directors. Dr. Becker and I both have a lot of experience working with medical students and residents. So we do come with this with our own bias as well. And so we're going to share a lot of our personal opinions and experiences. And we recognize that we have biases in what we like and what we don't like in a personal statement. And hopefully by having four panelists, if there's something that we all agree on, then it probably is true for most of your readers. If there's things that we disagree on, then it's something for you to think about and how you want to approach it.
Oh, let me just jump in and say, if you have any comments or questions, we will be monitoring the chat. So feel free to post stuff in the chat.
Thank you. So, the personal statement, somebody once said it's neither personal nor a statement. I think we'll try to kind of share some of the truths to that statement, but also dispel a little bit of the myth about it and how you really can make it a strength in your application. It is different than the medical school personal statement. While many of the medical schools are sometimes looking for things that are maybe a little bit off the wall or a little bit unique, I should say, we're looking for that too, but we're really kind of focusing on what you're going to be like as a professional. And I think you have to understand that it's going to be read by many, many people. Just in our program alone, your personal statement will probably be read by at least 10 different people. And so you really need to consider a diverse audience when you're thinking about the message that you're trying to share. I also don't think that anybody has ever been given an interview or a residency spot because of their personal statement. I know we've seen attempts where somebody thought they had the perfect personal statement that was automatically given them the spot. Once you really get to the interview, I think people use the personal statement to help guide what they're going to talk to you about at the interview. But rarely has anyone, or at least in my experience, never has anyone gone back in our meetings and said, you know, I really like that personal statement. That's why I want them in our program. So keep that in mind. But there are a number of people that have probably missed opportunities to interview because of their personal statement, either because of errors or kind of the topics that they approached. It is important, and this is a survey. It's from a little while back, but the numbers are actually pretty similar when you look through the years when they do this. But when you ask program directors, you know, what matters in terms of who you're selecting to interview, and you actually see that the personal statement shows up pretty high, especially compared to a lot of the other items on this object. So it is something that even in plastic surgery, and these are plastic surgery specific numbers, does carry some weight in your application and hopefully in the number of interviews that you're able to obtain. When you look later on to how this impacts the rank list, you see it falls down a little bit on the list. I think that kind of argues to the point I was just trying to make. Lots of other things seem to make it higher when they're deciding who actually to rank. So just a couple of very basic tips. Start early. Granted, we're sitting here on August 30th. So hopefully you've at least started, if not are getting close to the completion of your personal statement. I really want you to consider your message. Pick the qualities that you want to highlight in your application. Make sure you correct all the grammar and spelling errors. Make sure that your writing style is professional. You know, try to limit contractions and other things that you might use in more colloquial communications. And then don't get discouraged. This is tough. Writing about yourself is odd, it's weird, it feels different in a way. You feel like you're bragging about yourself when you don't normally do that. So don't get discouraged. It's tough to try to put this all down on paper. And again, for most students, really the goal is to make it not memorable, but something to help your reviewers with your application. The other purpose of your personal statement is to use it to address your deficiencies. This could include poor test scores, academic issues, extended time away, hardship. This is the best opportunity in your application for you to explain those situations. To, you know, whether it's give an explanation, to own up to it, whatever you want to do, this is your only opportunity. Maybe some of these things will show up in your letters of recommendation, but most commonly, this is your best opportunity. And so most importantly, I think it's really key that you're positive. We really want to read things that are fun, or not fun, but are positive or reinforcing and not negative. And so despite that, one of the things that we did last year was I wanted to present, and I know this goes against what I just said, kind of being positive, but I wanted to present 11 common ideas or themes that may be less powerful than you planned. And my point in this is that these are topics that we see frequently that you probably, when you're writing this, think, oh, this is exactly, no one else is going to have this. And I just want to share this as something to think about when you are putting your personal statement together, because it may not carry the same weight that you have. And we'll go through each of these, and then all of our panelists are going to chime in to share kind of their thoughts. So they may completely disagree with some of this, in which case then you can disregard whatever I say. But if we all agree, then it's at least something to think about. And so, you know, philosophical quotes. You see Yoda here, do or do not try. There is no try. This is one, as I admit, is controversial. This is one that's not really my personal favorite for most personal statements. This was good for maybe a college application. I struggle with it for residency applications, but Katie, what are your thoughts when you see a personal quote starting off a personal statement? Do you like it or not like it?
I'm plus minus. It can be successful and it also can be not successful. So I don't love it, but I also have seen really well, seen it really well executed.
So what quotes are positives for you? What are some of those qualities? If someone's going to do this, what sticks out to you?
I got to think. I'm sorry.
Everyone listening, by the way, everything I'm putting towards Deborah and Katie and Russell is all on the spot. We have not prepared this, so I am putting them on the spot in some of these. Russell, I'll let you go. What do you think about quotes?
Well, like like Katie said, they're hit or miss. I think if you put a quote in, you got to back it up. and it's got to be, you're really setting the tone and the theme to your personal statement. And, you know, I'd say it really depends on the quote. You know, how is this something that defines you, defines your life experiences? If it's something you live by, that you can back up with, you know, your, you know, some of the things you do, you know, it's like, you know, something from, you know, a world-renowned figure like Nelson Mandela. Okay, well, now you're setting a tone that you are about community good. So I want to see, how is this woven into your story and so forth. So it really depends on the quote itself. I've seen some quotes that they just don't work because they're not well thought of or backed up. So you got to be careful.
Deborah, what are your thoughts?
I agree. I would say it's not a hard and fast rule. Never use them, but I think that the likelihood of executing it successfully is probably lower than people generally think. And I would say that the personal statement is an opportunity for you to express who you are in your voice. So a quote isn't your voice, it's somebody else's quote. And so it just takes up space in your personal statement where you could be saying something.
Katie, I'm coming back to you. I'm not going to let you get off the hook here. So
what I would say is that it should be something like, you didn't just look through a bunch of quotes and be like, oh, this is something. It has to mean something to you. And as Russell said, to tie into you as a human and what you'll bring to the program, not just like, I can't even think of an example, but that's what I'd say.
all right, so Star Wars probably doesn't work.
No.
Okay. All
That
right.
being said, I do use that quote with my kids constantly. There is no try.
All right. I call it the never-ending list of what plastic surgery is. I see this in personal statements where it's, I love plastic surgery because of the intricacies of a cleft lip, the emotion of breast reconstruction, the power of a pressure sore closure, the finesse of a rhinoplasty, the mechanical nature of hand surgery. This is why I like plastic surgery. So, Russell, what are your thoughts on when you see the list of what plastic surgery is?
Well, yeah, I think that's can be a Pandora's box, you know. You know, you're writing, consider your audience. Yeah, we know what plastic surgery is. So you want to keep your words concise on that. And again, what does it mean for you? I think it's okay to list what inspires you about plastic surgery, but this can be overplayed or overdone for sure.
Deborah?
Yeah, I think that saying what plastic surgery is to plastic surgeons is less effective than talking about how engaging in plastic surgery affected you as a medical student. So moving quickly from the finesse of a rhinoplasty to impressed me because I knew I wanted to participate in this specialty because is the way that it should be used.
Katie, any thoughts on?
I agree with everyone else. The list is not a pro. You should be describing how plastic surgery makes you feel and how it has affected you and in your personal, not telling us what plastic surgery is.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are similar. I think it's taking typically 3 to 4 lines of your personal statement that no longer are about you. And so that's where it's not as powerful as you might think. Before we go on to the next one, there's a question in the chat and it's related to the first one, so we'll just do it now. But what are thoughts on quotes from a family member to start off the personal statement? Russell?
I think again, you know, it's and maybe I have my bias. Yeah, it's personal statement. So if there's something that's coming personal from a family member that has shaped your life experience and kind of defines who you are, I'd say go for it. I actually, I've seen that work.
Yeah, I agree. I was typing in the chat that I actually think a quote from a family member is sort of a different ballgame, because that's something that is uniquely your experience. And the fact that you quote a family member tells me a lot about you, that like you listen to your family, that you value what they have to say. And those are all qualities that may inform how you're perceived as a potential member of a team. And it also, and if it's something that stuck with you, like, you know, your family member told you something about whatever, the value of hard work, it can tell us something about what your values are as well.
All right, moving on things that may be less powerful than you think. Extensive patient stories. Devra, what are your thoughts on when you read patient stories in a personal statement, or what can make them worth the space on the paper for you as a reader?
When they are told with a significant brevity. The patient stories that are told in personal statements tend to fall in certain categories. So it's the same 5 stories that are recycled over and over and over again. And again, it's not so much about the patient, but how it specifically impacted you. Because, and this is something that we kind of try and drive home the entirety of the interview season and the application season, that really what all of this is about is finding a good fit between you and a program. So that's what programs are looking for. Will you be a good fit for our program? And how will you work with the team? So an extensive patient story then becomes about the patient and less about you. And we really want to know about you. So a story that you leverage to talk about how you work in a team, how you interact with patients, that's useful. But just the story of somebody who is devastated by an injury or a cancer diagnosis is sort of these recurring themes in all of medicine.
Edie?
I agree. Using it as a sort of an introduction to your experience, like a very short, small amount to say that you have interacted with patients and did have meaningful experiences with them in a way that pushed you towards plastic surgery, but not every single detail, a paragraph talking about the actual story, rather how this interaction affected you and your desire to be a plastic surgeon.
Russell, any additional thoughts?
No, 100% agree with my co-panelists.
I think the key word then is, if you're describing a patient story, keep it short. Use that space for you, not for their story. And again, that's not to say that these patients aren't powerful to you. When we go through all these experiences and reasons are powerful to you, I'm just trying to point out we do read them a fair amount, and so how to kind of best leverage them. Personal or family medical history. Katie, what are your thoughts when you read about someone's own injury or experience or their family?
I feel for them and understand how these experiences can shape you as a person and your desire to become a physician and a plastic surgeon. So I understand that. And sometimes it is very moving and powerful. On the other hand, I have seen too many details shared, and that can be sort of off-putting, that it's just a lot of information that it doesn't add to your story. It's too much. So I think it's a fine line, but can be used effectively at times.
Russell, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Katie. I mean, again, you have to be careful here. I think it could be in the realm of too much information. Again, there are powerful stories that shape us all. I figure, yeah, if there is something in your family that really inspired you towards plastic surgery, you're just not doling out a story to tell the story, perhaps. But I would say, be careful and again, keep it very brief. I've seen a few of these actually the last couple of years. And I would say, yeah, what Katie said, sometimes it can get a little bit too extensive and too off-putting.
Deborah, so what are your thoughts? And specifically, I mean, what are the things to share, not share? How do you respond as a reader?
I think this is a really tricky one. In general, I favor an approach to a personal statement that emphasizes what sort of resident and what sort of doctor you will end up being and how you will fit in a program. And so really the personal statement is a way to make the case that you will be a good resident. So personal or family medical history is risky. Sometimes people do have these experiences that shape them. But the other thing is you're applying for a job. So, and so I think that line between sort of, this is what got me interested, and this is why I'm passionate about plastic surgery and why I will be a great resident. And here's my whole story, which is kind of crossing that boundary of professionalism and your personal life can be tricky. So again, I think that just as a brief introduction to give a little bit of history to move quickly on to why you will be a great resident is fine, but extensive details I think are risky.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I mean, my personal, again, bias is I'm open to it. I think everyone on this panel, takes all of this probably better than a lot of the people reviewing applications. I think that's one of the things to remember. And so I think especially with your personal medical history, it's just something to be aware of, to be very cautious with, because you don't know how everyone's going to interpret that. And coming through in a personal statement or an interview may not fully give it the appropriateness for someone to understand where you are with that, whatever that experience was. So again, something to just kind of think of considerably. And again, I apologize for the fact that this logo keeps going on and off. I was trying to get it to stop, but I'll fix it for next time. Humor. For those, most of you probably listening are too young to remember Full House, but that's all right. Russell, what are your thoughts on humor in a personal statement?
Oh, again, be very careful. Jokes are interesting, right? So number one, it could be like the little girl here, Miss Olson, saying that's not funny. That's maybe what the reviewer or reader of your application is saying. Versus, jokes can also offend. You don't know where a joke's gonna go and who's the reader of your joke. Remember, it's a diverse audience. So I'd probably say a joke is that's a scary one. I remember on an interview, an interviewer asked me, he said, "Tell me a joke," and I couldn't think quick on my feet, and I said something, and that was the end of the interview because it was like, that wasn't funny, man. So be careful about
Russell,
jokes.
I just want to say I would have laughed at your joke.
I don't know about that, Deborah. My kids think I'm corny, so does my wife. So anyway, so jokes, careful. That's my thought, just my humble opinion.
Note to self, in case in case you don't make it to our talk on how to prepare for an interview, I guess you have to prepare for the question is tell me a joke. I don't have that
Oh,
one on my
yeah.
list, but we'll have to
That
have
was
that
that was
PowerPoint.
a curveball. That was a curveball that day.
Deborah, what are your thoughts?
You're right. It's risky. I mean, I feel like the only humor that probably works in a personal statement is British humor. But again, not everybody thinks that British humor is funny. It is important to have a sense of humor, but I think that it's tricky to communicate your unique brand of humor in a personal statement. So I think that the time to communicate that you have a sense of humor about yourself and about the world around you is in the interview, not necessarily with a joke, but just in your general approach, that you can sort of laugh at yourself and the world around you. But in your personal statement, it's really risky.
It's unclear if Deborah's kids there also are trying to play a joke on
My
happy way.
it is my kid.
Oh, no.
This is the real world for us. So,
Right.
Katie, what are your thoughts on humor? Have you ever seen something that's worked well?
Absolutely not. I think the personal statement is you want to be sincere and authentic, and that's what will shine through. And I think if you try humor, it will be lost, I think. And I think you just want to be, it's not a dating profile. It's not like your Instagram. It's not Twitter. It's just sincere and authentic and wanting to get a sense of you. So I think humor, no.
I think this is our first unanimous one that everyone had a thumbs down to it, essentially. So being good with your hands, and this is a creepy video, I realize that, but Deborah, what are your thoughts when you hear you're good with your hands? And I'm gonna actually tie this into number 6 and number 7, if that's all right, because we can't watch this clip for too long. But being an artist, so I'm good with my hands, or I'm an artist. What are your thoughts on that, Deborah?
So the thing about being good with your hands is you linked it to being an artist, but I sort of link it to other things when people are like, I love to bake. And like when I when I was on my medicine rotation, like I made cookies for everybody. And then they come and then I'm like, where are my cookies? All of a sudden the cooking disappeared. So the problem with claiming like I'm good with my hands is it's a pretty big promise. So I think that that it's I've always liked to build things, sculpt, make things, like do something physical. That's different than I am really good with my hands. So I think it's fine to say I enjoy creating things or doing things with my hands. But I think that saying that you're good at something may be a promise that you may not be able to deliver, depending on what happens in residency. So I would keep the focus on not necessarily bragging, but just the types of things that you like to do and the types of things that that you find stimulating and challenging. And being an artist, a lot of people, there is that sort of trope of plastic surgeons are artists. It doesn't always translate. Plastic surgery is, there are people who come with an art background who are great plastic surgeons, and there are people who come from an art background who are mediocre plastic surgery residents. So I think that it's not necessarily predictive of how you will be a plastic surgery resident, but it is relevant if you're an artist and you love art and it's something that you love talking about. I remember interviewing somebody who really did just love art and couldn't understand like why I don't love museums. And was trying to explain to me in the interview, like, oh, no, you have to go to a museum with me so that I can show you why all of this art is so great. So that's a very different, that's very different from, I'm an artist, therefore I will be a great plastic surgery resident.
Katie, what are your thoughts on the either I'm good with my hands or I'm an artist? I know I'm kind of blending two, but
No problem. Good with your hands? No, I'm not a fan of that. An artist, I think that you can use your experience as an artist to talk about what it was like learning to do art, what types of art, how you've gone through ups and downs in art, or whatever your experience with art has been and what you have learned from that, because that shows me more about who you are as a person and a learner and how you're going to grow and be in as a resident. Because I think we, as other panelists have brought up, we're just trying to know how you're going to be as a resident and how you're going to work and what you've learned up to this point about learning a skill, because surgery is a skill, it's a craft. So using art as a foil to explain that, I think is helpful.
You know,
Russell?
Katie, I know Russell, you're going to talk in a sec, but Katie, that's such a good point, because actually what you talked about, like, oh, how did you learn? Like, what were your ups and downs? That could be like anything that anybody does. Like I, tried to learn tennis and I was not that good, or, any endeavor. If you take what Katie said, that really does tell us something.
Yeah, I know, Russell, I'm gonna chime in before you too now. I feel bad, but yeah, I agree. Because if someone sat there and said and explained how good of a soccer player they were, right, you wouldn't care. If they explained what they learned from being captain of their soccer team and winning a state championship, or whatever they learned from it, you would respond very differently. And so sometimes I think the art thing, you're right. I'm not sure that people are always as sold that just because you're a good artist, you're going to be a good plastic surgeon. But the pathway to get there and the learning lessons may be the more valuable lesson. So, all right, Russell, I'm sorry. Both Deborah and I kind of cut you off there.
No need to apologize. I love the discussion, and I totally agree with what you all said. I think it's, I've never seen that I'm good with my hands. I think that's really too much salespersonship and a little bit desperate. There are things that you can get at to hint, okay, well, I've played the violin for 15 years and I'm passionate about that. Well, okay, I can infer from that, maybe you do have good hands, but, talking about I have good hands right off the beat, like Deborah said, that sets up expectations and sounds a bit desperate to me.
So I'm going to throw this right at you, Russell, to start here. We do have a number of artists, right? We've seen that. And I've seen all kinds of approaches of how people do or don't decide to try to share their art with me. What are your thoughts about that? Yes, no, is there a better way to do it? What do you think?
You mean about sharing art with you as well as making the claim of artistry?
Yes, I mean, we have a number of people, and I'll give the examples that we've seen people, put their website that has their artwork as part of their CV under their hobby. So if someone was interested, they could go look at their artwork. We've all seen people that bring, pictures of it on their phone, or, even in a portfolio, right, at an interview specifically. So what are your thoughts? I mean, for some people, they obviously respond to them. That's not to take away from the pride of someone's art, but if you are an artist and you're listening to this and you're saying, boy, I really think that somebody seeing my ability to do art is going to change their impression of me as a plastic surgeon or as a plastic surgery applicant. Do you do it? If you do, what's the best way to give someone that opportunity? I'm just throwing it out there as a topic.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't have the right answer. I know our program, we do ask applicants, people come for interviews, to make a little PowerPoint about themselves, like a little 3-slide or 5-slide show type thing. And typically on the slide deck, the artists out there will share some of their artwork in that slideshow. I think that's an opportunity to do it. I'm not so sure if on the personal statement, there's an opportunity to do it. Maybe in the application itself, under hobbies, you can have a link. But I'm kind of torn with that.
Deborah, what are your thoughts?
You know, I think a link to a website, you know, under your hobbies is fine. I think that's great. And I know this is more about the personal statement and not the interview itself. But I remember last year, Marissa Tenenbaum was saying that, you know, a lot of people have a lot of different skills, but if somebody were an athlete, we would all think that it was a little bit weird if they came and they brought a highlight reel and kind of made everybody or had everybody watch their highlight reel. So I think it's sort of the same thing. People have a lot of different talents, some of which are, you know, create physical products like being an artist, and some of which don't. And certainly having that information available if somebody asks about it, I think is fine. But I think presenting it prospectively sometimes can backfire.
Katie, any thoughts? You're maybe an art aficionado more than the other three of us.
No, I think having the link in the hobbies is appropriate and speaking about your, again, experience with art, but I do not think there is a direct correlation between and for me to assess your art, like I'm not an art historian, I'm not an artist myself. So for me to assess it for being good or excellent or poor, like I wouldn't know that. So my bias is like, I think it's awesome that you're an artist, but I don't think there is necessarily a direct correlation between being an artist of whatever level and being an excellent resident. I don't know that there's a direct correlation. So I would love to hear about your experience with art, but actually physically seeing it, I'm not sure how important that is to making this decision.
You know what happened to me once that was really interesting. I had a resident who was, by the way, an outstanding resident who was very skilled musically. So it was part of her application, and you know, and one of the things we talked about was why she didn't pursue it professionally, because she was really good. So here you have somebody who is an elite musician. Why not be a professional musician? Why be a plastic surgeon? And we talked about that, and that gave me a lot of information. So I think that that's actually an interesting aspect of these other skill sets. Like, and I'm like Katie, I don't, you know, I can look at something and say, okay, this is pretty or this isn't, but I wouldn't be able to assess either. Like, okay, this is really top tier art or this is mediocre. But what was it about art that you liked? And then why did you not choose it as a career and choose plastic surgery? I think that can be really informative.
All right. So the next thing that may not be as powerful is kind of overconfidence. I am going to be the best resident. I am going to be the chair at the University of Chicago or at Einstein or at Pittsburgh. I'm going to be president of ACAPS. I don't know. What do you think? Deborah, I think we're on. Now, Katie, you can start. Go ahead. Katie, what do you think about overconfidence, or how much confidence should be shown? What's too much?
I think humility is generally the way to go. It's the way, I think it's better to be humble as compared to overly confident. That may be my bias, obviously, but I would feel that humility and sincerity probably would trump overconfidence. And I would probably, if I read something in that vein, I probably don't like it quite as much.
Russell, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely agree. Humility, sincerity, and how you want to grow. Where do you see yourself uh, going on your trajectory rather than I am this, I am that, and making claims that, really those are lofty claims. And yeah, you can dream big, but to put it on your personal statement, like I'm going to be this and that, I think that's setting yourself up. Um, it's a little, it can be a turnoff, I think.
Deborah, what are your thoughts?
You know, when you're a medical student and you think like, oh, the only way I'm going to get an honors in medicine is if they think that I want to go into medicine. And then you realize that actually that's not true at all. They don't care what you're going to go into. They care how hard you're working. They care whether you engage in what you're doing now. And I think that the same thing is true and sort of the overconfidence is sometimes people think that what we're looking for is somebody who wants to do academic surgery or somebody who wants to be a surgeon researcher. And so they focus on these end goals rather than how they'll go through the process. And I think, and this is just my bias, I don't really pay a lot of attention to what somebody says they want to do ultimately right now, because that changes. I've seen so many people say they want to do academic surgery and then go into private practice. I've seen people who say that they never want to stay in academia, go into research and find that they love it. So things change, goals change, but at least to me, the most important thing is how are you going to engage in the process? How do you take direction? How do you grow? What sort of resident will you be? Because it's about growing and learning and becoming the best surgeon that you can be, whether that is in private practice or in academia or as the president of ACAPS.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess I have some of the same bias here. I mean, I think we read a lot of personal statements that at the end have a sentence of, I am going to be, your future, well, essentially your future boss. They're not saying it that way, but, and that's fine. I hope that you are. But I agree with what kind of Deborah was saying. I'm more interested in what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. Not that I don't want you to have goals, and I think you can share those, but that's actually not what impresses me about that, because we read it from everybody.
Yeah.
And so it just may not have the same kind of power that you think it does, because lots of people seem to put that in their personal statement.
Yeah, I'd also just be careful that, if you're overly overconfident, again, faculty and program directors, they read that, they're like, well, how are you going to fit in? Because I have, 10, 12, 15 other residents in my program. And, that may not mix too well. If you're, someone that overly confident, how are they going to mesh with the rest of the team?
So Russell, here's the question right back at you from one of our panelists. So how do you come off as confident, but not overconfident or bragging in the personal statement?
Well, I think there are ways, again, I think certain things that the personal statement for me at least are things to talk about that may not be obvious from the rest of your application. So I do think there are opportunities that, yeah, if you did something that makes you excited or you're proud of, you can talk about it, but be brief about it. And I think making kind of lofty claims, I'm going to be, the next chief of surgery at this program or whatever. I don't know. I mean, I think it's got to be couched a certain way. One just has to be careful. I think the other thing too, and I think you're going to get to this too, Jeff, is, bounce your personal statement off of other faculty. If there are residents around, show it to them so that they get a sense of it, and they can kind of guide you on what is too much and what's just right.
But for those that are, I know there's some other chats coming in. We are going to get to them, I promise. I'm kind of filling the ones in that are directly related to what we're talking about, but we will get to the other ones too. Yeah, in terms of the confidence thing, I would say for me, I like examples that let me decide how hard of a worker you are or how good of a team member are. So versus you telling me, I like just the examples that you can give me or what you learn from experience. I think that to me is how you can show your confidence. But Deborah or Katie, either of you have ideas on how to demonstrate kind of that you're confident? I mean, we do, for better or for worse, our surgical culture stereotypically tends to want some confidence, right? The, measure twice, cut once, or cut deep, whatever quote you want to use. How do you give some confidence without being overconfident?
Yeah, I was going to say when Russell said show your personal statement to other attendings, and I have these sisters. I showed my personal statement to my sisters, and they quickly got rid of anything that they thought was kind of overconfident, and I am mocked to this day about some of the claims that I made in initial drafts. But so show it to people who will be critical. I think that, again, focusing on the process and letting the reader come to a conclusion, or showing your engagement with the process in a way that will allow someone who's read your personal statement to ask you questions. Like Jeff mentioned at the beginning, a lot of times we use the personal statement as a jumping off point for our discussions in the interview. If you talk about an experience, so I think that that's it. You show, but don't tell. If there is something that you're really proud of, you can talk about something that you did that made you really proud.
All right, kind of moving on here. Oops. Number 9, distant past accomplishments. How far back do things matter? This is, again, probably, I see Russell laughing. He knows what Double Dare is from Nickelodeon years back with this line, but how far back is too far back? Katie?
I mean, you can talk about things that happened in high school and college that were formative experiences that taught you some lesson to say how you're going to work in a group. I think the whole point of it is like in high school, if you were, captain of the soccer team and you led the team to the state championships or whatever you did, sort of what you had said before, that you use this and learn from this experience, and it transitioned into medical school and college. And what I think you can use those as stories to show us the type of person you are, but not just be like, I did X, Y, and Z as a list of accomplishments to sort of brag about. You just want to use small anecdotes to tell us the type of person you are.
Russell or Deborah, thoughts?
Go ahead, Deborah.
Yeah, I think if you won the spelling bee in 8th grade and that gave you a life lesson that you have been applying ever since then, and that it served you well, then by all means, talk about it. But just listing the past accomplishments without giving it context of how it affects who you are right now and how hard you will work in residency, I think I don't think it's as effective. And again, the personal statement, and I guess it should not be more than a page. And a page is not a lot of words to tell us who you are and how you will be a great resident and a great surgeon. So every word should be focused on that. Like, in the next 5 years, here's how I'm going to be a great resident, or the next 6 years.
All right. Stories intended to create empathy. Thoughts on this, and we see this, and I think this kind of goes sometimes often gets tied with the personal experiences, whether it's a health experience or another personal experience. How do you go about this? I mean, I think, again, I have my thoughts here as we listed these, but how does this come across, Katie?
So I think this empathy, like we obviously want to have empathetic residents, but using these stories to create, I haven't seen it done very successfully. And I think it's just a limited scope to show us who you are. And this is just something that I haven't seen done successfully.
Russell, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I've not seen it done very successfully. I will say, if it's something that's compelling, that has shaped who you are, and maybe an area of adversity that you rose above, it might work. If it's important, but just throwing something out there to create empathy, I'm not so sure about that.
Deborah?
I suppose the question that you have to ask yourself as you write it is are you really using it to help illustrate why you'll be a great resident, or is it being used to create sort of emotional manipulation of the reader? And I think that if it's the latter, it can backfire. I remember when I was writing my personal statement, the advice I got is you want it to be unmemorable, because people will not give you interviews because of your personal statement, but nobody will give you an interview because of your personal statement. So it is all risk. And so these things, a sort of list of things, are things that are all, to me, the theme here is, although they all can be used, they are extraordinarily risky things to do in the personal statement, which should be sort of singularly focused on who you are, bring up experiences, but only insofar as they illustrate what kind of worker you are, what kind of resident you'll be, and how you'll work in a team.
Yeah, I think, Russell, you actually said it perfectly, and I think you captured what I was thinking without actually knowing that's what I was thinking. I want to hear about how you overcame a challenge. I like you telling me about that. I want to hear about it because I want to hear about it as your strength, not because I should feel for you and the challenge that you had. And I think you put that really kind of in a nice way. And so I think when you frame these things, because people have had varying levels of challenges, some significant challenges that I couldn't face even, and or others don't necessarily face. And I think, but when you go at it as trying to show the example of why your strength helped you through that versus I had this situation, I think there's a difference there in terms of how people interpret that and read that. And so I think that the way you put that was really an appropriate way to not, you obviously explain your experiences, but explaining them in the positive of your strengths and how you got through it, and why I would then sit there as someone hoping to have you as a resident would want you as part of my program. Last one here. You were born to be a plastic surgeon. Yeah, I see a lot of head shaking. I don't know if we can make comments here, but I think realize a lot of us, and we recognize that you probably weren't born to be a plastic surgeon. I think the stories of I knew I was going to be a plastic surgeon since I was a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, maybe that's true. But every time, at least I read that, I just kind of shake my head and say, okay, I really doubt that, because Heck, it wasn't even until I was probably a fourth year medical student that I actually understood what plastic surgery was beyond, what you might see on TV. So I don't know, other thoughts on that from anybody? I see a lot of agreement. All right.
That goes with number 5, Jeff. Humor. That's sorry. Throw that one out. Throw that one out. Don't even go there.
So, just to summarize, and we'll get to some of the questions, what do I like? And this is my bias, and I'm going to have everyone chime in if there's things that they feel differently. I want to know who you are professionally. That to me really matters. I want to know some about you personally too, but I really want to know about you professionally because you're signing up for a professional job. I want to know why you want to be a plastic surgeon, what you've accomplished, and for personal qualities, I want you to show me, not just tell me that you did this, but show me what you did. Let me draw the conclusion of what characteristic you have from it. Don't tell me you're a leader. Give me an example where you led and I can walk away from that saying, yep, they're a leader. They know how to motivate people. They know how to deal with a difficult situation, whatever you want. Again, highlight activities. So I don't necessarily need to pick out of your 40-page ERAS application. I know there's some questions about the common plastic surgery application that maybe will help that a little bit, but it is a way to highlight if there's 1 or 2 things that are really important to you. At least if you put them in your personal statement, I know that they're potentially more important than the other accomplishments that you have. Again, you don't need to recite your entire CV. And I think, if there's an idea of what you want to do in plastic surgery, it's great. But if you don't know, that's okay. And most importantly, I want to know how you're going to be a good, dedicated, hardworking resident. That fundamentally is kind of the things I'm personally looking for. Deborah, what are your thoughts? What are you looking for? Or what do you like to see in a personal statement?
Exactly the same thing. I think, no, you're exactly right. And I do think that one thing, although it can be tricky to do it, to hit the right tone. So I would seek advice, but if you really do have a weakness, sometimes your personal statement can be a good place to provide a brief explanation. Like if you're just a terrible standardized test taker and you have terrible standardized test scores, you may be able to address that briefly in the personal statement, not as excuse making, but just as a way of reframing it. But yeah, I think that I'm looking for how you're gonna be as a resident.
Deborah, I'm going to come back to you after Katie and Russell, but the question is going to be, how do you address in a personal statement kind of shortcomings, step exams or things like that, and without overtaking the whole personal statement? So, but Katie, what do you like? What things?
I would say of your list, I want to know the first thing most important is how you're going to be a good, dedicated, hardworking resident. And I also want to know that you've had life experiences outside of academic achievement. And I think that getting those things through in the personal statement is helpful, because just having academic achievement without having interacted with people in other ways outside of being a student, I think is hard for me. And I really value knowing that people have had experiences and overcome challenges and sort of are going to be able to deal with residency, which is really hard.
Also, what turned you on during a personal statement?
Yeah, I think all that's been said. How are you going to be a good, hardworking resident? Life experiences that have shaped you. I don't look at the personal statement as a summary or synopsis or regurgitation of everything that's in your application. If there's something in your application, a research experience, community outreach, a mission trip, something that shapes you and gives you a higher thought about why you want to be a plastic surgeon, then I think go for it. I think you also have to realize personal statement, although it's been ranked, yeah, it's high, there are other components. We talked about not being overconfident. Well, I think another great opportunity are your letters of recommendation. Those people who write about you, that's where you want to see. That's where I want to read about the boasting. You know, this person's incredible, this and that. Don't use the personal statement as a billboard, in other words.
All right, I think we have one last slide, and I'll get to the questions here. You know, what to do next? Again, we've talked about this, show lots of people, get feedback. You know, what I actually do is I have one of my residents who doesn't know you, or a couple of my residents read it, and I have them give me the first 3 words or one sentence that jumps out in their mind. And then I give that back to you as a student. And if that's what you want to convey, great. And if it's not, then you got to kind of figure out where you're missing the target. Review for grammar. You know, think about the plastic surgery common application. There may be some overlap with these questions. That's okay. I think, you know, I will say that the PSCA is still in its trial form with this. And so if there's a little bit of overlap and they're covering some of the same things, I think that's fine at this stage. And I do, just because we don't have another direct topic on this, I know that the application date's coming up. I'm gonna give a few quick other pointers to just think about, and then we'll get back to the rest of the questions. One, please, please, please get a professional headshot for all of your applications. Have your medical school will do this. It should be in professional attire. The background shouldn't be, you know, at a wedding. You shouldn't have a glass of champagne. You really need to have some sort of professional photograph. That is what it will be, you know, at least at our place. I mean, that will be shown on a screen when people are discussing you after the interview. So you want it to be something professional. Please respond to all the emails from programs and faculty at this, you know, if they're reaching out and communicating with you. And remember, we're a small family. We all talk. That's not to say that, you know, it's a bad thing, but again, if you're saying stuff and misbehaving or something like that, recognize it's a small area. So, and then again, be mindful of your social media presence from this point forward. You're going to be turning in applications. That's not to say that you can't have a social media presence. That's not saying you can't post whatever you want on it. Just be aware of it and be aware of how others may interpret those things. And if that's what you want to demonstrate or not. And again, I'm not trying to bias or say you should or shouldn't be on social media. You can share your politics, you can share your personal life, do whatever you want. Just be aware that other people will be looking at that. And if that's okay with you, great. Just don't be surprised. And then remember that this process still involves a bunch of randomness at the end of it, despite all of the things that we go through here. So with that question, so Deborah, I don't know if you want to kind of go through some of the questions that are here.
Yeah, there were a couple of questions in the chat that I'm going to sort of combine, because to me they're the same. So there were a couple of questions about how a personal statement for example, an IMG who is a practicing plastic surgeon, or an independent applicant, how those personal statements should be different. And I'm kind of lumping them together because to me, they are sort of all people who have had different life experiences and are coming to things from a different vantage point. Jeff, you wanna?
Oh, I guess I get to share my point. You know, I think you need to write your personal statement as an overarching thing, and then if it happens to sort of tie into the PSCA a little bit, that is what it is. Again, I think that's, you know, your personal statement really is what people may focus on, and you know, everybody except for a very small handful of programs is going to be using still ERAS this year. I mean, a number of programs are also going to use PSCA, so that's out there. But I'm not sure that they have to be distinctly different applications or answers.
And so there was another question about that, how we balance not being born to be a plastic surgeon versus the impact the applicant's parents had on their life growing up. And I'm sort of assuming that this means somebody who knew from a young age that they wanted to be a plastic surgeon because of their relationship with their parents. Katie, how would you advise somebody like, you know?
I think your relationship with your family as it shaped you as a young adult and as a child to becoming a plastic surgeon could be used. I think as long as it's just illustrating your positive qualities but I don't, that's all I would say.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would just say, I thought we were talking specifically about the statement, I was born to be a plastic surgeon. That's a no-no, which is, maybe I'm being simple or too obvious here, but I think, again, if your parents shaped you, had a hand in, of course, yeah, parents are important. All of our parents have affected us, but if there are specific ways, I mean, I'd say again, again, for me, my parents were Jamaican immigrants, and from day one, I saw hard work, determination. My mom was a nurse. How did that shape me becoming a plastic surgeon? I think there are ways you can weave that in, but the statement, I was born to do this, well, that's going to be contended.
Yeah, and I will say, when in that point, that's exactly what I was trying to get across, was I knew since I was 4, I was going to be a plastic surgeon. I think that, the hard work behind it and your family's history can be very, very relevant to who you are as a person and explain your qualities. So I agree with that. And sorry if that was unclear in my initial discussion.
Someone had a question about how to end the personal statement. Are there any no-nos on ending the statement? Should it be just something like some anodyne platitude, like I am excited for the future, or by the end has kind of the die been cast? What are your thoughts on a good closing line? Katie?
I mean, I think enthusiasm and sincerity about the excitement you have about starting to embark on being a resident and being a plastic surgeon, ending that way, I think it's totally, I appreciate that. Just saying, like, I'm really excited about getting the opportunity to learn plastic surgery and to be a plastic surgeon. Just some sincere enthusiasm for the process that is in front of you, I think conveys what I want to hear.
I was gonna say, yeah, I agree. Like, I think your last couple of it's like your last chance to give the last couple of adjectives that you think are important about yourself, right? Or those qualities that you think are most important about yourself. That's a pretty standard way to end it. And the only way that Deborah, you'd ask there, this was a number of years ago, somebody ended their personal statement that they had a talent. I'm going to call it a mishmasher just to protect them. That wasn't their talent, but they basically said, you want to know what a mishmasher is? You have to interview me. I never found out what a mishmasher was. I mean, I think that's the one way to not end it. Honestly, it was like, this is, so anyways, but I think there's a chance to give a couple adjectives at the end.
Yeah. I don't know. I sort of agree with the person who posted the question in the chat. I think there is no great way to end a personal statement other than some sort of, platitude. But by the end, I expect to see something like that. Like, I am excited to begin the next chapter. I look forward to being a plastic surgery resident, and I expect that, and I don't judge, but I would judge your mishmasher. So, I'm trying to, forgive me if I have missed anyone's question. Please just let me know. I don't mean to. I'm just trying to scroll through and make sure I get all of them. But there were a couple of questions about shortcomings, and how you can integrate shortcomings in your personal statement, either in your application or low scores. What are your all thoughts on how to do that in a positive way?
Yeah, I think it's got to be balanced. You can't mea culpa and show that side. I think showing how that experience, again, we've all had shortcomings, you know, that, so don't be ashamed of it. On the other hand, show what that shortcoming showed you. What did you learn from it? How's that going to shape you going forward? You know, I once had somebody, and again, like Jeff said, I have to be protect anonymity, but you know, someone who had like a misdemeanor, for example, and you know, we ended up interviewing the person. They were like, well, they explained it. They said, this is what I learned. I was young, I was foolish, this happened. End of story. I almost see it as, you know, taking your oral boards, you know, and you get a complication and the examiner is brooding over you. Well, don't beat yourself up too much. Show them what you learned from that error or from that shortcoming, or, oh, I didn't quite get this right. That's okay.
You know, and we're all human too. And I think one of the things that when you become a plastic surgeon, it's not all rainbows and unicorns. So and so you will have complications. You will have patients who you cannot establish an effective therapeutic relationship with. Like, so things happen, and knowing that you can face adversity and overcome it is very powerful. And there was somebody who I was actually really excited to interview, not because of something in the personal statement, but in a letter of recommendation. Somebody had actually written, you know, this person rotated on our service and like wasn't that good, and then said that they wanted to be a plastic surgeon, and we were all shocked. But I sat the person down and said, you know, you need to do these things and you need to really be a superstar. And then this person came back and was a superstar. And so I thought, okay, that's actually somebody who has not have everything go their way and has overcome it. So those types of stories, how you overcome things, can be very powerful because we expect that will happen in residency. And to someone said, you know, as an IMG, should the personal statement differ from the norm or follow the same principles? And I'll start out on that. I would.
Eric, I just had one comment on the last one real quick. Somebody asked, you know, should I explain some weakness or some hole in my application in my personal statement or in a separate statement? And you actually only can submit your personal statement. There really isn't room for an additional kind of paragraph of explanation. So if you're going to do it, it has to be in your personal statement in that regard. So anyways, sorry, Deborah, I didn't mean to interrupt. Just wanted to add that question there.
Yeah, no, that's, and again, I would briefly mention it. And I would frame it in a way that you want the message to be, that, you know, not as an excuse, but how that experience will help you be a great resident. And sometimes those experiences can help people become great residents. Like if somebody, for example, doesn't study the way that they should, doesn't get a good score on something that they needed a good score on, and learned from that is a mistake that they will never make again, and then they sort of follow through, that can make a compelling argument about why you would be a good resident. As an IMG, does my personal statement differ from the norm or follow the same principles? I would say it follows the same principles. I think we have IMGs. we interview them. It's mainly about their life experience. I think that we recognize, we know that being an IMG is hard, particularly if English isn't your first language. I think that that is an amazing accomplishment to be able to even take an exam in a language that is not your native language, if that's your situation. But what do the other panelists think about it?
I think for international graduates, I think the one thing is why train in a US program sometimes may want to be part of your personal statement. Because again, in some situations, there are different qualities probably of the training programs. In some situations, there's the same. And I think helping someone understand why or what the connection or reason is, I think may be helpful to try to get someone to keep looking kind of through the rest of your application. So I do think that's the one thing that it's worth thinking about or considering in your personal statement.
I'm just scrolling through it to make sure that I haven't like missed any questions. Somebody asked about opinions on different versions of personal statements for different programs. And I can start off. I think that that's fine, but make sure that they aren't conflicting. Like don't write a personal statement to one program like, oh, I really, really, really want to be in New York. It's the only place that I want to be. And then write a personal statement, for University of Chicago saying, oh, I've always loved University of Chicago. It's the only place I want to be, because plastics is small and there is a non-negligible chance that people find out about it.
Yeah, I'd be careful about customizing things. I mean, even it's just, I don't know. I think it just brings more stress for the applicant. Just, yeah, it's nice to know about the nuances about different programs, but I even had one application or statement where they're trying to customize it. They misspelled one of the faculty's names, and yeah, no one took offense, but it just shows, oh well, there wasn't much attention to detail there. So I don't know. I'm not a big fan of customization, but that's just me.
I would also agree. I think it's just too much room for error. I mean, there are other ways in this process to share your interest in a place. Your personal statement is probably not the place to do it. Whether it's attending meet and greets ahead of time, whether it's reaching out to the program, whether it was, obviously it's limited this year, you only have one away rotation, but your personal statement and trying to personalize it to that place, I think you're just going to run yourself into troubles. And even then, I have to be honest, if I'm reading as a reviewer, if you personalize it for me, in a way, I just assume you're doing that for all the other programs. You went online and picked some snippet about that. And I know that sounds horrible because that's not what you did. But as I'm reading through that, I'm sitting there going, okay, this is unique because we don't normally see this. So they must be doing this for everybody. And therefore, it really can't be a unique statement. They're just trying to pick out why, what would work for me. So again, I recognize that's not your intent. I'm not saying you're trying to do that, but that's probably how most people are reading that if you actually kind of personalize it in that regard.
Yeah, that's a great point. It can come off as, not genuine when you're trying to be genuine.
Like those postcards that you get for like car insurance that are like written like their handwriting, and you know that it's not handwriting. We know this is really high stakes for the applicants, and we know how much time and effort the applicants are putting into their applications and how much they want to match at a program. And for most people, it's there are people who really maybe do want to be in a particular city or at a particular program, but the overwhelming majority of people just pretty much want to match somewhere in plastic surgery, and we recognize that, and we're not going to hold that desire against anybody. At least I won't.
One other question, I know we're kind of already ran over our planned time here, but independent pathway applicants, anything different in their personal statement? I don't know if any of your programs have independent pathways as well, or if everybody's integrated on here.
We do. We have independents, and yes, their personal statements are a little bit different because they already know what it's like to be a resident, and you know what it is to be a surgeon. So focusing on somebody who is an independent, we talked about you know, distant past accomplishments. Somebody who's an independent, like, okay, reading about the spelling bee in 8th grade would really be a distraction in that personal statement. But focusing on why, after doing what about it was engaging about plastic surgery? Why do they want to be a plastic surgeon with the experience that they have, and what will they bring to a program? But the thing about independent residents is they're applying against other independent residents. So so everybody comes from that vantage point.
Katie or Russell, do either of your programs have independent pathways?
We don't.
We don't.
So sorry, we'll work on that for our next our next panel to have a little bit more applicability to the independent pathways. So, well,
But if you are an independent applicant, reach out, because we do have some concurrent programs specifically for independent applicants, because there are some different considerations.
well, any final thoughts here, Russell?
No, I think, you know, again, personal statement is a great opportunity. It can be high stakes. Look at review those kind of no slides that Jeff has come up with. I think they're great. You know, use it as an opportunity to talk about, you know, what would make you a great resident, hardworking resident. And, you know, if that means sharing a personal experience, a story that shaped you, or an experience that shaped you, by all means, I'd say use that.
Katie?
I would say just try to be sincere and genuine with using stories to show us who you are and what kind of resident you're going to be. Don't use any gimmicks or tricks to try to sort of get our attention. As you said, no one is getting an interview from their personal statement, but it can sort of be like, what was that? And maybe you wouldn't get an interview. So just play it safe, get on base.
And Deborah, I think probably similar to most of these webinars in the last 2 years, you can have the final thought for this.
Oh my gosh, what was that show? Jerry Springer, right? where he did a final thought. But yeah, I think that I agree with everyone. It's avoid any gimmicks, and have some trust in us that when we read it, we really are looking to see who you are, to make sure that we can find a good fit where, so that you'll be at a program where you are thriving and learning and becoming the best surgeon that you can be. So really show us who you are and how your life experiences have shaped you. Make it about yourself. Avoid the gimmicks.
All right, well, thanks everybody for attending. I appreciate it. We'll probably be having another panel in about 2 weeks. It's going to focus a little bit on how to evaluate programs. More information will come through the listserv on that. There'll also be an FAQ related to some of the application issues that are out there, items coming out shortly, probably at the end of this week, by the end of this week. So thanks everybody. Please reach out. Let us know if there's other things that we can help you with through this process. And again, thanks to our panelists for taking time out of your night and moving your other meetings and everything that you did to be here. Thanks.
Thank you. Have a good evening.